Chapter 38. Haunting Truth. I was too stunned by what Alessandro had just revealed. How could Charles have done something like that? Killing someone. It was unfathomable. I looked at Alessandro, my confusion and disbelief written all over my face. "Confused little cat," Alessandro taunted, his gaze cold yet somehow amused. "Yeah, confused, but mostly because I think you're lying. This has to be some sick joke, right?" I fired back, hoping he would admit it was a mistake, that he was just trying to mess with me. But he simply smirked. "Well, fiery cat, if you think I'm lying, why don't you ask your dear Charles? Oh, sorry, Ace, the truth yourself." I felt a rush of anxiety knot in my chest. Turning to Charles, I met his gaze with desperation in my eyes, searching for some denial, some reassurance that everything Alessandro said was just a twisted lie. "Charles, tell me the truth. You didn't kill her, right?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, clinging to the little hope I had left. Charles' shoulders slumped as he broke eye contact, his head hanging low. He didn't say a word. And then, just faintly, I saw it, the glistening of unshed tears in his eyes. My heart felt like it was shattering. How could this be real? "Well, I don't think he's going to explain, so let me enlighten you," Alessandro said, his tone laced with venom as his face twisted with a simmering rage. "Let me tell you the real story." I swallowed, feeling my stomach twist with a mixture of dread and curiosity, as Alessandro began to speak. "We were best friends, Charles and I, from as far back as I can remember. We grew up together, practically like brothers. My father worked for Ace's father. He was his personal assistant. We weren't exactly rich. In fact, we lived modestly, just a few miles away from Ace's grand mansion. My dad would take me with him sometimes, and it was there I first met Ace." Alessandro's words took on a softer, almost nostalgic tone as he continued, and for a moment, I glimpsed the friendship that once existed between him and Charles. "I remember the first day I met Ace," Alessandro said, his voice steady as he slipped back into memory. "I was just a scrawny kid tagging along with my father, completely out of place in that enormous mansion. I clung to his side, terrified I'd knock something over and cause trouble. And that's when Ace came bounding down the grand staircase, this big, mischievous grin plastered across his face. He didn't care about my scruffy clothes or the fact that I was the assistant's son. He just looked at me and said, 'Do you know how to play hide and seek in a place this big?' Of course I didn't, but before I knew it, he was dragging me through hallways, showing me the best hiding spots. I was surprised. It was like he'd chosen me, even if we came from different worlds." Alessandro paused, a faint smile on his lips. "We spent that entire day running through every room, slipping past maids and guards, giggling like we owned the place. By the time my dad was ready to leave, we were both covered in dust, but grinning from ear to ear. That day, Ace didn't just see me as the assistant's kid. He saw me as a friend. From then on, Alessandro explained, he'd find reasons to visit Ace whenever his father was working at the mansion. Their friendship grew naturally, strengthened by shared secrets and the thrill of their childhood escapades. They were like brothers, inseparable despite their backgrounds. They'd sneak out to explore nearby woods, dare each other to climb the tallest trees, or spend hours talking about their dreams. As we grew older, Alessandro continued, it was no longer just about fun and games. We became each other's confidants, telling each other things we wouldn't dare admit to anyone else. He was everything to me, and I thought I was everything to him too. Then I met the love of my life, Clara. It was sophomore year when I first saw her, Alessandro began, his gaze drifting as if he were seeing Clara all over again. Ace and I had somehow ended up in the same elective. It was some literature class neither of us really wanted, but we figured we'd get through it together. And then she walked in. His face softened, and I could see the memory playing out behind his eyes. She sat by the window, the sunlight catching her hair, giving her this glow. It was like she wasn't even real. She was just sitting there, completely absorbed in her book, completely unaware of everyone around her. And I couldn't stop looking at her. Alessandro paused, letting out a faint, bitter laugh. Ace noticed immediately. He always does. What's the matter, Alessandro? Never seen a girl before? He teased, grinning like he'd already figured me out. Before I knew it, he was dragging me over to her. Clara, this is Alessandro, he said, all smug. He's my best friend. She looked up, smiled, and that was it. I was done for. As he spoke, I could feel the depth of his connection to her, the awe, the thrill of that first meeting, and the quiet hope that must have blossomed within him. Alessandro's words grew softer, more nostalgic as he continued. From that day on, the three of us were inseparable, he said, his eyes clouding with memories. Clara just fit. She was fearless and kind, and had this way of making you feel like you could do anything. She made everything brighter. With her, Ace and I felt like we could conquer the world, like the three of us together were unstoppable. She was like sunshine, he said, his voice filled with a quiet awe. There was this lightness to her, a kind of joy that just radiated from her, you know? She was always smiling, always finding some little spark of happiness in the things most people wouldn't even notice. It didn't matter if it was a rainy day, a busy campus, or just a quiet moment. Clara had this way of making everything around her feel brighter. He paused, lost in the memory, and for a second I could almost picture her through his eyes. She had this laugh, he continued, a faint smile tugging at his lips. This warm, easy laugh that you could hear from across the room. And every time she laughed, you couldn't help but feel better. It was like she carried this endless optimism, always looking for the good, always trying to make things lighter for everyone else. Sometimes she'd just grab my hand out of nowhere and drag me to watch a sunset, or make me listen to her favorite song on repeat, because it made her feel like dancing, as she'd say with that grin of hers. Alessandro's gaze grew distant, as though he was right back in those moments with her. She was fearless, too. She'd take on anything with a smile, and she never let people's negativity get to her. To her, life was this huge, beautiful thing meant to be explored and celebrated. She had this way of making you feel like everything would be okay, no matter what. She'd call me her serious one and tell me I needed to lighten up. And the funny thing was, with her, I did. I sat there, listening to Alessandro pour out his story, his voice steady, but carrying a weight that made my heart ache for him. He was reliving it all, the love, the memories, the bittersweet moments he'd buried deep. I watched him, noticing how his eyes softened every time he mentioned her name, how he seemed almost transported to a different time. It didn't happen all at once, he began, almost like he was confessing. My feelings for Clara, I mean. I was drawn to her from the start, but every day we spent together, those feelings just kept growing, no matter how much I tried to push them aside. He let out a small, self-deprecating laugh, shaking his head. One night, Ace had to leave early, so Clara and I were left wandering through campus, just the two of us. We didn't talk much. We just walked, looking at the stars. And then, out of nowhere, I just told her. I told her everything. But I'd been falling for her since the day I saw her in class, that I couldn't stop thinking about her. I thought I'd blown it, that she'd laugh or pull away. He paused, glancing away for a moment, a faint smile touching his lips. But she didn't. She just looked at me and smiled. She said she'd felt the same for just as long. I don't think I've ever felt that kind of happiness. I felt a pang in my chest, watching him remember those first days together. It was clear that to him, Clara had been everything. We became a couple after that, Alessandro continued, his voice gentler now, almost reverent. At first, we kept things quiet. But it wasn't long before Ace noticed. We were spending more time together, and things between us had changed. He glanced at me, his eyes darkening just slightly. We'd go out, just the two of us, exploring the city, finding all these little places that were ours alone. She had this way of seeing beauty in the simplest things, and with her, I felt like the world was brighter. Even though he was trying to keep his tone casual, I could feel the depth of his feelings for Clara, the way she had somehow become his entire world. He paused, gathering his thoughts, and I could see a hint of sadness creeping in. We still hung out as a trio, he said, the smile on his face wavering. Ace would joke about being the third wheel, but he was happy for us, or at least he tried to be. We'd get together on weekends, like always, but it wasn't the same. I started spending more time with Clara and less with him. The room grew silent as he finished, the weight of his words settling around us. Alessandro's gaze stayed on the floor, lost in a memory that felt as close as yesterday, and I found myself torn between sympathy and a quiet, unspoken sadness. But then what went wrong? I pressed, my voice trembling with urgency. How did she die? Did Ace really kill her? My curiosity was at its peak, mixed with disbelief and a sickening dread. I had to know. Every part of me screamed that Ace couldn't be capable of something so dark. Yes, he was rough around the edges, intimidating. even terrifying at times. When we first met, I thought he might have killed me with a single look if he wanted to. But after getting to know him, it seemed impossible. Somewhere beneath that hardened exterior, I knew there was more to him. Alessandro's jaw clenched as he looked away, his gaze distant and haunted. Turned 20, and that was when it all began, he said, his voice a mixture of anger and sorrow. When he reached 20, he was supposed to become the heir and take over his father's mafia. He was expected to step up as the leader. It was a responsibility Ace had never wanted. He hated his father and everything he stood for. His dad was a true monster. Alessandro's eyes grew glassy, as though the memories had clawed open an old wound. I watched him fight back tears, his gaze lifting to the sky as if seeking strength. He took a shuddering breath, pushing his grief down, but the pain was still etched into his face. His father had a twisted rule, Alessandro continued, his voice growing colder. To prove his loyalty, Ace was given a test that was supposed to prove he was worthy of the family name. He had to kill a woman to become the heir. My heart sank, dread curling in my stomach. A woman? I whispered, barely able to form the question. Alessandro nodded, his eyes dark with rage. Yes, Ace was given 2 options, to kill his sister or to kill my Clara. His voice broke, and I could see the raw agony flash across his face, the betrayal he could never forgive. Ace chose her. He chose to destroy my whole world. The weight of his words crushed me, my mind spinning as I struggled to process it. But why? What kind of sick rule is that? I stammered. Why would he have to kill someone he loved? And why his sister, or Clara? That doesn't make any sense. It's his father's twisted way of proving loyalty, Alessandro explained, his voice hollow. For years, that's how his family has initiated their heirs. They believe that if you're willing to kill someone you love, especially a woman, then you're strong enough, ruthless enough to lead. In most cases, it's the mother or a sister, someone innocent, someone who doesn't pose a threat but means everything to you. His father figured out that Ace cared for Clara, maybe not in the same way I did, but enough to know she'd break him. The horror of it settled heavily over me, my hands cold and trembling. And Clara, she didn't have anyone else? I managed, a part of me praying there had been some other way out. Alessandro shook his head, pain filling his eyes. She was an orphan, no family, no one to look out for her except for me, and eventually Ace. She was everything to us. But Ace's father knew exactly what he was doing. He wanted to break Ace. He thought he loved Clara, and anyone Ace loves was bound to die. But Ace, couldn't he have refused? I asked, desperation edging into my voice. I wanted to believe there was a way he could have avoided it. A loophole. Something he could have done to save her. Alessandro's expression hardened, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. Maybe he could have, if he was stronger, if he was brave enough, but he was trapped in his father's twisted world, raised to follow his commands. And to him, following orders was all he'd ever known. I think he told himself he had no choice, or maybe that the pain would fade in time. He looked at me then, his face shadowed with grief and fury. But some things don't fade. Some things burn into you, leaving scars you can't erase. And he'll have to live with that guilt for the rest of his life. Because for him to become the heir, he chose to take the one thing that meant the world to me. Silence settled around us, heavy with the weight of Alessandro's story. I felt sick, my mind racing as I tried to make sense of it all. To reconcile the ace I knew with this horrifying decision. But no matter how I tried to rationalize it, a part of me couldn't ignore the truth Alessandro had laid bare. Ace had chosen loyalty to a world of darkness over the light of Clara's life. Guess what? Alessandro's voice turned sharp, his expression hardening as bitterness filled his eyes. After years of living with what he did, this guy decides to just fly off to LA. Like he could run away from everything he'd done, from the life he was supposed to lead, and leave it all behind. His laugh was cold, hollow. He didn't give a damn about me or anyone else he'd left in ruins. He just slipped away, like none of it mattered. I could feel the tension radiating off him, the fury simmering beneath every word. 5 years. 5 years after he became the heir, after everything he put us through, he just ran. Alessandro continued, clenching his fists. He thought he could escape it all. His father, his enemies, his responsibilities. He abandoned his title, the people, the empire he was supposed to control. Just disappeared, as if he could hide from the monster he'd become. He looked away, his jaw clenched as he took a deep breath, as if steadying himself. And while he was off living some new life, thinking he'd escaped, I was back here, left to pick up the pieces, and it tore me apart. But one day, I made a decision. I was going to find him. I was going to make him pay. So I did the only thing I knew would get me close to him. His gaze hardened, filled with a dark determination that sent a chill down my spine. I joined the Mafia myself. I climbed my way up, took over territories, gained power. I had nothing left to lose, and that gave me the edge. It wasn't long before I was one of the wealthiest, one of the most powerful in the game. I became the second richest mafia in the world, all with one goal: revenge. To find him, to make him look me in the eye and understand the destruction he left behind. Alessandro's eyes bore into me, fierce and unyielding. It took years to track him down, but he made one mistake. He came back here. He thought he could return without consequences, that I wouldn't find him. But now here he is, and there's nowhere left for him to hide. He paused, and his voice dropped to a deadly calm, each word laced with chilling finality. And this time, I won't let him go. Not until he pays for everything he's done. I don't understand why Ace would kill her. But I swear to you, I'll find out the truth, I said, trying to reason with Alessandro. His voice shook as he shouted back, "This is the truth! You think I made all this up?" Alessandro's face was twisted with fury, and he pointed a trembling finger at Charles Ace, who lay bleeding on the ground, his body beaten and broken. He destroyed me. He destroyed Clara, her dreams, her life. And now, I'll destroy him. I stared down at Charles, my heart pounding. He was barely conscious, his breath shallow, blood pooling around him from the 2 gunshot wounds in his arms. His face, once full of defiance, was now pale and etched with pain. Seeing him like this tore at me. And no matter what he had done, I knew I couldn't just watch him die. I rushed to his side, kneeling down and pressing my hands over his wounds, trying desperately to stop the bleeding. He looked up at me, his eyes glazed with pain and regret. "Stella," he whispered weakly, "you don't have to. I deserve this. Just get away." I ignored him and turned to Alessandro, my voice cracking. "Please, Alessandro, let me take him to the hospital. He won't survive like this." Alessandro's face twisted with anger. "No, I'm not letting that happen," he hissed, stepping closer. "He deserves every bit of pain he's feeling. You're not saving him, Stella." Suddenly, Alessandro's men surrounded us, their guns drawn, each one trained directly on Charles. In that moment, it felt as if time froze, every heartbeat a countdown to the inevitable. Desperation surged within me, and without thinking, I threw myself over Charles, wrapping my arms around his shoulders and shielding him with my own body. "No," I shouted, my voice breaking. "If you're going to shoot him, you'll have to go through me first." A murmur of hesitation spread through Alessandro's men. They exchanged uneasy glances, their fingers still on the triggers, but unsure. Alessandro clenched his fists, his face torn between anger and shock. "Stella." Charles's voice was barely a whisper. Don't do this for me. Just let them. Go, Stella, please. I can't see you hurt." I shook my head, fighting back tears as I tightened my hold. "You saved my life, Charles. I owe you everything. And I'm not going to stand by and watch you die. Not like this." Alessandro's eyes narrowed, his voice dropping to a cold, unfeeling tone. "Then you've made your choice," he said softly. He raised his hand, signaling his men to lower their guns. My arms were wrapped tightly around Charles, and I wasn't letting him go, no matter what. I could feel his labored breathing against me, and every second that passed only made me more determined to protect him. Then I saw Alessandro's men moving forward. Confusion flooded my mind. Hadn't he just told them to lower their guns? So why were they closing in on us? Before I could react, I felt a rough hand grip my arm, yanking me back with force. I held on as best as I could, digging one hand into the car handle and pressing the other against the ground for leverage. But they were too strong, and my grip began to falter. "Let go of me," I shouted, fighting against their hold. But they just tightened their grasp, pulling me further away from Charles. Author's note: Char Ace killed innocent Clara. Subscribe for next chapter.